haven't been problems. Let's see.
Windows K.
Is it hooked up on there? Do I have to move it?
Hold this button down and hit the K. It should do it, well, it's not doing it.
Andy, one other announcement. Is our fellowship meal still on for today?
Yes, fellowship meal is definitely still on for today. Yes? I already did.
It showed that I.
Press Windows and K on the.
That's what I did.
Oh, do you have Bluetooth turned on?
Yep.
Okay. It says Windows and K on the keyboard is supposed to connect. Or connect from the Action Center.
Mm-hmm. He had it connected on there. It says my PC was connected.
Well, we'll see.
It's up to the right one.
Oh, it says it's not connected.
Well, this says it's ready to connect. And that's what it normally looks like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me try again. Let me search. What was it called? Adapter. Let's see if this will pop up. I just had it connected. I don't know what happened. Let me try. Let me go and let me just see. It says not connected. Let me remove this device and then let me try again. And try again. See if that will do it. Add a device, and he will have to, there it is right there, he'll have to accept it. It's trying to connect.
Mm-hmm. Try the Windows K and see if that does it.
Yeah, I just did it.
Something came up here.
Oh, okay. It says times up your television, quit time, try again. That is weird.
Okay, I'm just,
Okay, I'm gonna try again.
connecting to direct. It says connecting something now at the top. So.
Yeah, it's connecting to my computer.
That's the name of his computer.
Yeah, that's me.
There it is.
There it is.
Okay.
gotta love technology, right?
When it works.
When it wants to work. It got. Did it say it just disconnected?
Yeah, it says, tells you to press Windows K again.
Is there a way we could just load it on there?
Yeah.
I just do that. And then. Can I make this shareable, my PowerPoint?
That I don't know.
Sorry about that. Anyways, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here to share my personal testimony. My name is Peter O'Connor. I came from Wildwood Health Institute. I've been there for 2 years. I've actually came from Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. I was in the military for 20 years in the United States Air Force, and I spent my career there most of my time. Before that, I was living in Georgia, a small town called Bowden, Georgia, and before that, I actually lived in California. So I lived everywhere. But anyways, I'm just thankful just to be here, that you allowed me to share this personal testimony. It's called The Ride of My Life. And I giving this testimony because there's someone out there that you might know or that has fallen away and you think there's no hope. And my mom kept praying and praying for 15 years because I grew up in an Adventist family. Let me see if this clicker works. Okay. Can we hit next? There we go. So we got to go back to my childhood. I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist in California, and typical Adventist. And you know, my parents were the type of Adventists that we did everything what the world was still doing. You know, I grew up in a public high school. I grew up in public schools, so I didn't go to any Adventist institutions or schooling. But I remember growing up at the time, you know, I didn't really know what an Adventist was because I was adopted when I was 6 years old. And my first adoptive parents actually was Catholic, and I couldn't remember that as 5 years old when the first time I got adopted. The second time I got adopted was about 6, 7 years old by an Adventist family in California. And to make the long story short, as I got older, I got to know more about God and more about, you know, who Christ was. But I didn't really have a personal relationship with him. Next slide, please. As you can see, this was during my high school year. I got baptized. A couple of my family members got baptized. And, you know, I did some Bible studies. But I still didn't really have that personal connection with God. I thought I did. I knew Bible prophecies from somewhat I knew that my parents had taught me in watching Amazing Facts and Doug Batchelor and, you know, the Revelation of 14, you know, the three angels message. So I was 17 years old. I was planning to go to Southern University. My parents are somewhat middle-class people. They didn't really have much money, so they told me I had to pay for my own college. 17 years old, 0 credit. I didn't really have a connection with God. I was like, there's no way I could pay for college to go to Southern. It was expensive, especially the tuition, living there, the food. So my second option was to join the military because my dad told me when you turn 18, you got to get out of the house and do something. I was like, oh, 17 years old. It's April of 2000. Graduation is next month. So I see a couple of my friends joining the military, and the first branch that I really talked to was United States Army. And I have an uncle that served in the United States Army for 23 years. And he gave me a call, and he said, hey, Pete, what are you doing? Why do you want to join the military, and why do you want to join the Army? He goes, I think you're too smart for the Army. He said, join the Air Force. You'll have a better opportunity. You have a better career. At least they have a lot of careers where it will transition to the civilian side. I said, okay. So I tried out the Air Force, signed up for the Air Force. And next slide. And this was my going away at my church at Carrollton Seventh-day Adventist Church in Georgia. And I had my family there, and my grandma, grandpa, which are dead now, and my parents and my sibling was there. And next slide, please. And I remember when I graduated from high school, you know, I didn't really have that connection with God that we all should, right? It was just more of appearance than anything. My heart wasn't really into Christ at that time. And the devil knew it. He had the door wide open just for me. So as soon as I left from high school and joined the Air Force and left for boot camp, and boot camp is, of course, is in San Antonio, Texas. I remember the first day I got there. It was a rude awakening because, you know, I was sleeping and I was thinking, I woke up and I was like thinking I'm in my bed. No, all I heard was yelling and screaming and profanity. And I remember when I first got to San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base. And I remember the drill instructor, which we call him TI, which is training instructor. And they're all yelling at you, you know, cussing you up and down and trying to intimidate you and try to break you. And I remember when he came straight to my face and he goes, "You don't look like an O'Connor to me." And I started laughing. So, and then he's like, "You think that's funny?" I was like, "Yes, sir." So he's like, "Get down on your face. Give me 20 push-ups." So I did 20 push-ups. But I remember during my military career, I wasn't really concentrating or focusing on my Christian walk with God. I was more focusing on my military career, on where I was going to go in life. I went to tech school. Next slide, please. Next slide. And I went and stayed at Lackland Air Force Base. I was in the Air Force Logistics class, and these were my classmates. Next slide, please. And I remember when we graduated from our tech school, we had orders, and everyone gets their orders. And I remember my order was Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. I was like, where on earth is Nebraska at? And I was like, I had to go look on the map, and I was like, I'm going to go up north. So the good thing about being in the military is at boot camp, or actually not boot camp, but tech school, you could trade and offer other people in your school to, if you want to trade bases. And I was like, man, you know, I don't mind going to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. I'm like, that's a nice place. Nobody wanted to trade with me. They're like, I don't want to go to Nebraska. People were offering money to trade. And I remember when I first got there, January of 2001, and it was cold. I had jeans and a t-shirt. I had to go back into my luggage to grab some more clothing because it was really cold. And I remember when I first got there, the first week they had a blizzard. They shut down the base for 5 days. And I was like, mercy, where am I at? I was like, you know, I've been to snow, but not that kind of snow. Next slide, please. But the good thing about being in the military was I got to travel the world on Uncle Sam's dime. And many places I got to travel. I was actually at this one unit with it's a reconnaissance squadron. Offutt Air Force Base is actually one of the important bases out of all the military. They have the U.S. Strategic Command Unit, and it has every single branch on there. And what that base consists of, they keep track of everything from land, air, sea, and space. So they see what's coming. If that base was ever shut down, our military would be demoralized. They would not be able to function because of that base. And why they put it in the middle of the country is the reason why is because it's a heavily guarded base, and they have a bunker underneath there, and they put it right in the middle of nowhere, you know, in Nebraska. But I got to spend so many times traveling, visiting different countries. I've been to Germany, I've been to Thailand, I've been to Greece, I've been to Japan, I've been to Alaska. I love Alaska. I don't know if you've ever been up there. That's a beautiful place besides the cold, and you barely get any sun during the day, especially during the winter time. The sun goes down there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You only get like 4 hours of sunlight. And I remember when I first got there, my very first deployment there, it was negative 60 degrees. So imagine that, how cold it was. But, you know, I spent many times traveling. I worked on, it's called the RC-135 Reconnaissance, the Cobra Ball. And it's one of the only jets in the world that we have. What our mission was, we spy on other countries. That was our mission. So whenever we are in Alaska, we are spying on Russia. Whenever we are in Diego Garcia, which is a small island, we are spying on, you know, somewhere in the desert area. So, and I've also been to Qatar during 9/11, when 9/11 hit. And most of you know or remember what happened that day. And after that, I volunteered to be an Air Force recruiter. I spent 5 years as a recruiter in Nebraska, and I was recruiting lots of kids. And I remember those days because long hours that I had to work. And at that time during my career, I had nothing to do with God at all. I was going out, I was drinking, I started hanging out at biker bars. I got interested in Harley Davidson. Matter of fact, I met a lot of good friends in a bar, and that's when I started falling away from God heavily. And next slide, please. And of course, you know, everyone in the military comes from different values, different places where they have been raised from. So not everyone is a Christian or what they believe is the same as you. Next slide. I remember when I first bought my bike, 2009 Harley Davidson Iron 883. And I was going to bars, you know, bar after bar. And then I remember motorcycle clubs, MC clubs. And then next slide. Then I bought me a bigger bike. And that was a 2012 Harley Davidson Street Glide, and that's what I rode. And the reason why I bought a bigger bike is if you're going to join a motorcycle club, you got to have a fast bike. And so I remember I had a couple of friends that I knew was in a motorcycle club, and I knew them because some of them I was stationed with. And I wanted to know more about them. So to be accepted in a club, motorcycle club, which is an MC, you have to be invited. You can't just invite yourself. So I got invited by one of their president of the club. I knew him. And I started hanging out with them, started going to their functions every Friday night, Saturday night. It was always going to a bar, either a strip club or some type of biker bar, wherever it was, hanging out with them. And they want to see if you could make a commitment and to see how loyal you are, you know, because they don't want just anyone to join their club. So I remember the first time they had asked me, they said, hey, would you want to join our club and become a hang-around? So a hang-around is you basically hang out with the club for at least 3 to 6 months before you even are asked to be a prospect. And I remember I said, sure. And at that time, I was married. I came home one day, and my ex-wife was like, what did you just do? You know, she had no say-so. I just told her this is what I was going to do, whether you like it or not. And so she got on board with it because, you know, she loved me. And so I started hanging out with the club for 3 to 6 months. And after that, they had asked me if I wanted to become a prospect. And to become a prospect, you got to prospect for a motorcycle club for a whole entire year. And it's basically you're on call whenever they need you. And you have to have a 100% vote. If one club member says no, you cannot enter it. So I had a 100% vote. Next slide. So this was me as a prospect for, back slide. Back up? Yeah, there it is. So this was me as a prospect. And this was our national meeting down in Nebraska. And I remember this as it was probably my third or fourth week being a prospect for the club. And these two other guys I've served in the military with, and we became prospects together. And being a prospect for a club is basically whatever they want you to do, you got to do. Whether if it's to go get them a beer, watch their child, whatever it is, cut their grass, it's whatever they needed. And I was willing because I had that commitment. All of us are all military. We know how to follow orders, and we know how to obey them, right? Because all of us are all military. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of me wiping down every single bike down. This was in the morning. That was being a prospect. And all of our events, we didn't really do anything as I look back. It was just making money for the club. I mean, to be honest with you, I spent thousands of dollars just being in a motorcycle club, wearing a vest, riding a motorcycle, getting drunk, you know. Luckily at the time I was married. And I remember when I first got patched in, next slide, they do a ceremony. Well, it's not even a ceremony. It's like going to a gauntlet, and you got to go through it to get that center patch. So there's 3 different stages on how you earn your patches. So your first one, you get NEBR, which is Nebraska, and of course the MC. That's your first stage as a prospect. Within your 6 months, you receive the top rocker, which is your name of your club, whether if it's the Hells Angels, the Banditos, the Sons of Silence. Those are your club name. And then your center patch is the most important part because that signifies the club's logo, and you earn that when you become a full patch member. And of course, you have to get a full 100% vote in from the members itself. And as you can see, I got 100% vote because I was very dedicated. And this was my actual day when I got patched in. And this was in Kansas City, Kansas, of course. And I remember all the times that I hung out with the club. Next slide, please. All I did was drink and get drunk. We went to a lot of club events. We went to the Hells Angels Halloween party, the Banditos events. I don't know if you know what a 1% club is. Does anyone know what a 1% club is? So 1% clubs are these outlaws motorcycle that does stuff that we don't see. They only put in a persona, kind of like a fake person, and they do all kinds of good deeds and like charity, but in reality, they're an outlaw club, motorcycle club. Drug trafficking, sex trafficking, I mean, you name it, that's what they do. And we knew these clubs because it was mandatory events that we had to attend these events. And as you can see on the bottom, it says AVFFAV, and it stands for American Veterans Forever, Forever American Veterans. And it's the same thing what the Hells Angels are. Hells Angels Forever, Forever Angels. And it didn't really do anything. I mean, this was a time that I was completely gone away from the church, had no care in life. All I did was drink and party, smoke weed, did a little bit of cocaine. Next slide, please. And these were the events that we held. Every Saturday, we always had some type of event. It's called a poker run. I don't know if you've ever heard of a poker run. A poker run is you go bar to bar and you collect, poker. If you ever played poker, you got to get the best hand, right? Who's all played poker before? There you go. And you got to get the best hand. And so you go every bar and you draw a card for each stop. So there's at least 5 stops. And these were all of our events. That's all we did. Partied, hang out, try to raise money. Next slide, please. And these were the members that I thought I called brother because that's what the club is. It's called brotherhood. As soon as you put that vest in, you're a brother, no matter what. Whether if you did something wrong or right, they got your back. So I remember going to bars and hanging out, and I remember there was a show called Sons of Anarchy. Who's ever heard of that show? When that first came out and everyone was watching it, a lot of people got afraid because they were like, oh, this is what motorcycle clubs were. And I remember I was going to a bar on a Friday night, and the line was so long to get a drink. They did what Moses did. They parted the Red Sea and let me go through so I can get a drink. That's how scared they were. I used to carry a knife, and it had a name called, it was the Alabama Slammer knife, and it was like this long. In the state of Nebraska, you could open carry a knife in any bar as long as it's open and carried, as long as the place allows you. And most of the bars that we went to, they all knew us. They all knew all the motorcycle clubs and all the bikers. And most of the people would not mess with you unless they're college kids, which they have no clue who we are. So when you mess with one brother, you mess with the whole entire club. And then you have old ladies, didn't matter how old they were. They have a patch on their back. It says property of. And my wife, my ex-wife, was property of TBG. And everyone knew, and every club knew that that was my wife or my girlfriend, and no one was allowed to touch her. So this was my lifestyle being in a motorcycle club. Next slide, please. And all we did was we just went to events, got drunk, hang out with other club members, and partied with them. That was the lifestyle that I was living in, drinking, smoking. Next slide, please. And I remember this was one of my final events. This was in Colorado. It was one of the most, not the biggest, but one of the events that they hold for a motorcycle rally besides. Who's heard of Sturgis? Okay. So this is one of the other events that we attend to that are mandatory. We have lots of mandatory runs. And mandatory runs are runs that we as club members have to attend, or else if you don't, then there is repercussion. And I remember this was my one of my final event. And I remember something was changing in me because one of the club members, and it's always the senior club members that's been in the club for so many years, that always watches you. And he said, yeah, I've been watching you, and I could tell there was a change in you at the end. And I started changing. And I don't know what it was. Next slide. But this was my final ride. And I was actually their treasurer for the club. So I knew where the money was going. And I know God was, slowly calling me. And the reason why I started veering away from the club scene was I started getting sick at my early 30s. And that was the only way for God to wake me up. Because I was going to transition into another club. Who's heard of the Hells Angels? Okay. So the Hells Angels have a support club called Valhalla. They're a 1% club. And they wanted me to join their club. And I've gone to their meetings, and a couple of my club members knew, I think one of them knew. And that was the path that I was going to take. Because once you step into that realm, and then you want more, and the next thing you know, you're a Hells Angels club member. And that was the path that I wanted to take because I wanted more than that. But I remember something in my mind was tugging me, was saying, no, it's not time yet. Because they kept asking, hey, when are you going to transition to our club? Hey, when are you going to do this? And I kept going, it's not time yet, it's not time yet. And then I remember I got sick. And then when I got sick is when I realized, okay, I need to change my diet. So, and I was doing this while I was still in the military. Who's heard of Jesse James? He was the governor from Minnesota. Did you know that he was part of the Mongols MC Club in California when he was in, while he was in a service, when he was a Navy SEAL? He was doing that back then. He was doing military and club life at the same time. And that's what I was doing for past 6 years. Yes, about 6 years. 6.5 years, almost 7. Next slide, please. So what was my purpose in life? My purpose in life was to go bigger. I wanted to join the Hell's Angels. That was my purpose. To do things that I've never done before. But God had a different plan for me. And I remember when I got sick, I completely changed my diet. My diet at the time when I was in this club was what my eyes could see is what I ate. I ate everything, from seafood to pork to everything. Deer meat, you name it, I ate everything. That was my consistent of diet. And I remember I got really sick in my early 30s. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor checked for everything, colon cancer, everything. And the doctor says, "You're fine, you're not sick." I was blacking out, and I was like, well, then why am I visiting you? I'm like, there's something wrong with me. So I remember I was on YouTube at work, and I was watching this YouTube video, and this lady goes, "Why don't you just change your diet?" And I was like, okay. So I changed my diet. One day, I went from what my eyes could see that I ate, went to a plant-based diet in one day. And I remember everyone in my work, in my unit, was like, "You are crazy." And they would always bring all these junk food, donuts, all kinds of good stuff. I was like, why do you guys got to do this to me? I'm like, this is a temptation. But I remember, because I was getting sick, and plus I was blacking out. I mean, if you're blacking out and you're riding a motorcycle, that's not good. And I remember one of my club members, and I was telling them that, and they were like, well, this is not good. And unfortunately, I never had any episodes blacking out while riding, because we ride fast and hard. And so I remember I started changing my diet. I started getting better. I started juicing. I juiced for almost a whole entire year. Within 2 to 3 months, I started getting better. And that's when I started hearing the Holy Spirit calling me. And I remember that day, I called up my sergeant of arms, he's the person that's supposed to take care of all the club members. If there's any issues of other clubs, he's the one that, besides the enforcer, he's the one that takes care of these events. And I called him up, and we were good friends too. So I called him up. I said, hey, brother, I said, I need to meet with you. He goes, okay, come to my house. I went to his house. I said, I got some bad news, brother. I said, I'm leaving the club. And he says, what? He goes, we got to have a meeting, right, with the rest of the club members. I said, okay. And I remember he started crying because I was one of the most active club member. Any event that we had, I hardly missed them. I probably missed maybe 3 or 4 out of the 5 or 6 years I've been with them. That's how active I was. There was not much events that I missed. Every event that they had, I went to it. And so I was one of the most active club members that they had. And I remember the transformation. And I remember they all made a big circle around me. And I remember that day, and they said, okay, what is your purpose? Why do you want to leave the club? And I blatantly just told them, I said, I'm actually want to give my life to the Lord and follow God again. And they were in shock. One other brother, he just punched me. He was just so upset. He started cussing. I believe he cussed. I know a few of them said a few bad things. But they just couldn't understand it. So when the transformation happened, next slide, they want to see if you are going to be who that person is, right? So it's been over close to 6 years since I left the club, but I still witness to them. And let me say, it was the best thing in my life ever, because I really had a personal relationship with Jesus at this time than ever before. I started giving my life to the Lord. It was like the prodigal son, come home to me. I did everything what the world wanted me to do, you know, and I wanted to experience that, but there was no happiness. This was my baptism. I had to get rebaptized. Next slide. You don't have to play it, but that was my day that I told God that I want to give my life to the Lord. So the transformation happened. Next slide. So I remember I went to ASI in 2000, I think it was 2020 or 21. No, it was 21. It was in Orlando, Florida. And I remember this guy, he had a vest on out of ASI, and I spotted him. I mean, he was so obvious. It said, Adventist Motorcycle Ministry. I was like, whoa, we have a ministry? So I ran up to him, and he was the vice president of their ministry. And I said, hey, brother. I said, so we talked. I gave him a quick testimony where I came from. And he gave me his business card. I went back home to Nebraska. And at that time, didn't talk to him for a whole year. And I remember January, I was in my car, and the Holy Spirit said, Sturgis is coming up. You need to go there. And I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to do what you said. So I called up Juan. I said, hey, Juan. Hey, brother. I said, I want to help you guys out. Let's go to Sturgis and let's collaborate as a ministry. And at this time, I was with another ministry called He Returns. When I started going to this church, when I got baptized, they saw me that I was in fire for God, and they asked me to join their ministry, so I joined their ministry. And then I remember Juan said, hey, let's get Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry. I was like, what? There's another motorcycle ministry? So James is their vice president of Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry. So we called him up. We had a Zoom meeting, and I was in charge of it. And then I said, we're going to try to get on 3ABN. Everyone knows who 3ABN is, right? So I sent an email. We all fasted in prayer. And then I get an email back. They said, yes, we would like you to be on our show. And we've been on 3ABN 3 times already. We will be on there next week to talk about what we did last year, 2023, at Sturgis. And this was our very first year, 2022, 3 ministries collaborating, Sturgis. What my previous lifestyle was is what I'm doing now. Next slide is I witness to the bikers. And we have a booth. Sturgis is very expensive. You thought ASI and OCI and all these are expensive. A 10x10 booth is about $10,000. It's about $9,500. And we usually get 3 of them. So this year we're getting 3 10x10, so that's like $30,000. But God always provides. That year we brought the beast, Mark of the Beast. That was our attention, because everyone wanted to take a picture and said, that is an ugly thing. What is that? And it was a great thing for us to witness to them, because it's the 10 horns, the papacy as the little horn, and this was our group, small group. And James is right behind me with the hat, with a beard. He used to belong to a 1% motorcycle club in California. If you've ever heard of his testimony, look it up, called Mission Sturgis on 3ABN. He knew the Hells Angels. He knew Sonny Barger from the Hells Angels. He died many years ago. I think it was 4 years ago. But he has a powerful testimony because he got converted in prison. He did everything, drug trafficking, you name it, shootout. So me and him had something in common. The rest of the guys have never been in a motorcycle club or don't know what it is. So we were able to train them, well, not train them, but to help them on how to talk to MC clubs, on how to approach them. Because there's certain protocols on how you talk to them. But they understand if you're just a regular Joe Schmo, they understand. Next slide, please. So that was me right there handing out the great controversy. And that was our deal in Sturgis. And Sturgis happens the first week of ASI, which is August 1st and ends on August 11th. It's almost a 2-week Babylon party is what I called it. And the reason why I know that because I've been to Sturgis. And everyone loves this great controversy book. Matter of fact, a lot of them thinks it's a Donald Trump book. I don't know why. I tell them, no, it's not a Donald Trump book. But they look at it and they're like, well, we want it anyways. Next slide, please. And these were all the literatures and brochures that we would hand out for free. And a lot of people's like, you guys are giving all these books out for free? They're like, oh, yes. But these are donations from other people. Next slide, please. A big selling was Steps to Christ. It's on the bottom. It looks like Harley Davidson, right? It's got a motorcycle. That's our biggest one that we hand out. We could hand out 5,000 of them within 3 days. Last year, there was about 560,000 people attended this event. So you could see that there's a lot of people attend this event. And it's not just here in the United States. There's people everywhere attend this event. You got people in Germany, Canada, Australia, Europe, you name it. They come to Sturgis, and they come and party, and they bring their bikes, and whew. And you get to see all the other 1% clubs as well, too. I remember I wasn't in the club yet, but in 2012, when I was in Sturgis, we went to the Hells Angels clubhouse. And if we would have stayed there 10 more minutes longer, we would have been caught in a shootout with the Banditos. And I look back, I didn't even know it at the time. I went home a month later, I was looking on YouTube, I was like, what, there was a shootout there? Looked at the date, I was like, I was there. So yeah. And that is my ministry. Next slide, please. And these are the Bible racks. And you won't believe, there are kids that attend these events. And you got naked women walking around. Who's ever been to Sturgis? I remember my pastor, Pastor Atwood at New England Church, he said he remembered going up there for a seminar. This was the week of August. He's like, why is there so many motorcycles? Until he met me. I told him, well, that's the week of the rally. I said, it gets really busy up there. Next slide, please. And this is Main Street. Thousands of motorcycles parked on each way. And all bars and all kinds of stuff. It's just a huge festival of getting drunk, fornication for 11 days. That's all it is. And it gets even worse when the sun goes down because everyone's all drunk, you know. Their mind is polluted. All they're thinking is about getting drunk and who they're going to sleep with. Women are getting crazy, walking around naked. I mean, there's things that I can't even talk about. Next slide, please. So this was a brother Christian, a good brother of mine. And as you can see, he's all tatted up. He became an Adventist many years ago. He did some prison time and loved to ride. He knew a lot of 1% Club. And it was a lot easier for us to talk to these people because we live their lifestyle. And they understand that. And then they will ask questions. Oh, how did you come out of this life? And we tell them, like, it's not us. It's through Jesus. This is Donna. I remember meeting her, and she lives there, and she wanted prayer. She had lost her son a year ago, and her son had died, and she had one son left, and she asked for prayers. And so God answered our prayer for her son. So keep her in prayer. Next slide, please. And this was the mark of the beast that we took. This is an expensive, what you call a display. Just for this, if you want to buy this, it's like, I think about $30,000 to $35,000. He has many others. He's got the woman riding on the harlot, on the beast. You remember Revelation 14. So this is what we use in 2022, and it drew a lot of attention because a lot of people liked it. They were taking picture, asking what it was. We gave them pamphlets as what the mark of the beast was and who the center was, the papacy, and they loved it. Next slide. So 2023, we raised funds and we're back at it again. Next slide, please. And this is our good brother Ed. He is with Adventist Motorcycle Ministry. And I drove and they rode. We took turns. I rode their Cam-An. It's about a 1,300-mile drive. So at their age, of course, they can't keep riding for so long. So I was able to ride their bike from here to Sturgis. Next slide, please. And this was his wife's bike. Next slide. And this is Jerry on his bike. So it was a long trip for them. Next slide. And this was the trailer truck that they were pulling in case any bikes broke down. Next slide. And this was last year when we got there. Of course, it was raining. I mean, we got really poured on. But this was last year's 2023 event, and this is what we're going to be talking about on 3ABN next week. Back at it again. Next slide, please. And this is Main Street. There's a tent, and there's every vendors, and these people are just, out partying, all kinds of stuff that they're doing. Next slide, please. And it's a huge event. When you have over 560,000 people attend this 11-day, that's a lot of bikes and motorcycles. And unfortunately, every year there is a death, at least a dozen or more, because people drink, they ride, they get on their bike, they go too fast, and you know who the one that dies? Are the experienced riders, because they take the curve, the turn way too fast, and they're still drunk while they're still riding. They don't know what they're doing. And they don't realize they just ended their life. Next slide, please. And this was our group. On the bottom left, that's Les Shibo. I believe he is from Wisconsin. On my right bottom, that is Doris, and her husband behind her is Jerry. And James behind me with the cowboy hat. He has been doing this since 2015 with his ministry, with Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry. And so we partnered up as 3 ministries. I said, let's work together as 3 ministries. Adventist Motorcycle Ministry, Sabbath Keepers Motorcycle Ministry, and He Returns. I said, let's partner up and let's do this together because Jesus is coming soon, right? And the people needs to be witness out there. Doesn't matter who they are, right? Doesn't matter what background they come from, what gangs, what clubs. They all need to be reached. And I could personally go up and talk to a Hell's Angels, to a Banditos, to a Son of Silent, and talk to them and give them Jesus and give them a personal testimony. And they like to see that because they know the lifestyle that you used to live. I remember I was given a glow track to this. You could tell he's been in a club for 30 years. And I gave him a glow track. It says, Judgment Day, are you ready? I gave it to him and he looked at it. I think he was from the Sons of Silence. I don't know if you've ever heard of that 1% club. They're out of Iowa. They're one of the oldest 1% clubs. And he looked at it and he kind of chuckled and he put it in his vest. And I was like, I hope I get to see that man in heaven. Because they all deserve Jesus, right? And last year, next slide, I got to see Donna. I was walking in the midst of everyone, and the Holy Spirit was like, Donna's right there. I said, there's no way that's her. How am I going to see her out of 500-something people? I ran into her, and I asked her, I said, hey, Donna, I said, how are you doing? Do you remember me? She goes, oh, yes, I remember you guys. And she goes, I thank you for the many prayers, and my son is coming back to church, and I thank you. And I said, that is great, Donna. So I took a picture with her. And I still keep in contact with her. I text message her. I give her some spiritual devotions from Ellen White. And I ask her, hang on there. And she always messages me. And she's a single mother. And so keep her in prayer. And she lives in Sturgis. And hopefully I'll get to see her again this year. Next slide, please. And these are one of the books that we hand out. The National Sunday Law, I tried it. I said, let me see how this is going to work out at Sturgis. I started handing them out, and they were taking it like hotcakes, like it was candy. And they loved it. I don't know why, but they loved it. Next slide, please. And this is Justin. Justin would be out there. Because you have Main Street, people will come ride up and down, to show off their bikes, turn on their loud music, and he would give it to the rider while they're passing by. So that was our main purpose, is where a literature evangelism. And last year we had the Daniel statue, and this is Jerry, walking by. And we have a booth right next to this other booth. It was really hard because it was an audio booth where they put speakers in your bike to make it louder. So all we heard was every music that you could think of, from ZZ Top to AC/DC to Guns N' Roses. I mean, you name it, that's what they played. And I was like, oh man, I know all these music, I'm just trying to draw it out. But the Holy Spirit helps you, And we got to know our neighbor. Next slide. Next slide again. And of course, that is Main Street. And that is our Daniel statue. Next slide. Next one again. This was another attention getter from last year, because people was like, what is that? And we tell them, we're like, it's the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. You remember? And they're like, oh, yes. So that gives us an opportunity to give them a small Bible talk and what, the dream was, and, what each, gold and silver and brass, what represented. So it gives us time. Next slide, please. And we had a health booth. We were giving free massage. Bikers love massage. Trust me, they do. When it says free, because Sturgis is so expensive, they don't want to spend a lot of money. And, they do have massage booth, but they're charging like $5-10 a minute. We were free. So we had a lot of people come to us free. And we would give them massage. Next slide, please. This is Joan. She was giving one of our applicants a massage. As you can see on the left side where those three gentlemen are standing, there was a guy there named Chris. He had stage 4 cancer. You couldn't even tell. He was all tatted up, beard and all. You couldn't tell that he was sick. But he only had a few months to live. And I remember we were talking to him because he kept coming back and forth whenever he had a break. He would come talk to us, and we would talk about Jesus to him, about giving his life to him. We gave him some health magazines. I gave him a literature about coming to Wildwood, why don't you come over here to see if we could take care of your cancer, at least slow it down, And then there was another lady. Next slide, please. As you can see on the top right, there was a lady there that we got. Her name is Jessie. She was their entertainer. I had to block her out because of the way she was dressed. It's very provocative. But we got to know her. So, next slide. So Joan, that was her giving her a massage. And she had a personal testimony that she used to be in the church. She had some other things that, I can't really talk about, but she was going through a lot. And you don't even know what these people are going through. And, and all we did was just preach Jesus to them and talked about God. That they have that opportunity to come to God the way they are. Like what God says, him that cometh to me, I will in no wise cast out. Right? Come to him as you are. Not, I got to change first. No. Come to me as you are. And these were one of the health literatures that we were giving away with GlowTrack, 16 ways of reducing stress. And next slide. And this is one of the books that we were giving away too. These were all free, Fighting Disease with Food. And all the books that we get is all free, all donations. And we're all thankful for all of our donors, because without our donors, we would not be able to do this. But God has opened this door, and he's not closing it until the day he comes. And our next slide, and I remember meeting this guy. You know, he's out there. At least someone is out there, you know, telling these people, Jesus is coming soon. Next slide, please. And this was a group of Christians as well that we got to know that are writers. They're not Adventists. But you know what the good thing is about? We gave them a couple of cases of great controversy books for them to hand out for us. That is a blessing, right? And hopefully they read it. Next slide, please. So this year, our 2024 rally, again, you know, if you're willing to help, we do this because God has called each and every one of us to work in his vineyard, right? Whatever your talents are. And if you guys ever want to volunteer for next year's rally, or if you want to come to this year's rally, you are more than welcome. And you can contact me. And we're always looking for volunteers to come up to Sturgis, South Dakota and help out. Now I want to read a statement from you to you. Next slide, please. It says, Christ is drawing everyone that is not past the boundary. He is drawing him to him today, no matter how great that sinner is. He is drawing him. And if the sinner can get his arm fixed upon the cross of Calvary, then there is no conviction of sin. What is he there for? Because the law has been transgressed. And he begins to see that he is a sinner. And Christ died because the law was transgressed. And then he begins to look to the righteousness of Christ as the only thing that can cleanse the sinner from his sins and from his transgressions. And that is so true. And that's what I did. I transgressed his law. Every single one of them, every 10. But because of Christ's righteousness, because of his blood and what he has done for me, I am blessed because of him dying on the cross, and that he gave me so many chances. And don't think that if you have any family members, keep praying, because my mom prayed 15 plus years for me. She never gave up. Never. And I thank my mom for praying all those years, because some of us would have gave up, right? She knew the lifestyle that I was living in. She never pointed the finger. She never degraded me. She never said, you're doing this incorrectly. She just lifted up God. She always said, Pete, I know what you're going through. You're always in my prayers. Pray for those people that you know that are out there in this world. Everyone has that chance to come to Jesus again. Because the lifestyle that I used to live, I thought I was lost. But God said, two paths. You either take my path or you take the destruction. And that was the path that I was heading to, was that destruction of life. And I thank the Lord every single day that he got me through it. And I don't know why he brought me to Wildwood, to be honest with you. He brought me here, and I'm glad because they know what I do, and I witness to them. Every time a biker comes to our store, to our country store, I give them a GlowTrack, I talk to them, I give them a testimony. I said, hopefully I get to see you in Sturgis so that I could witness to you, or tell them, like, if you're going to Sturgis, I'll pray for you, you know. I really don't want them to go to Sturgis, of course, but that's what I do. I go to Sturgis every year and witness to them. And we also go to Daytona Bike Week in Florida as well. But Sturgis is the biggest one. I think back in 2017, when it was the 81st, they had 1.4 million people attended the Sturgis rally. It's the biggest one. And that is my vineyard, is I witness to bikers. Any bikers, don't matter what club you're from. And I just want to thank everyone here for inviting me here to share this personal testimony. And I thank the Lord. Thank you.
Do you have a card or anything with the donation information on it?
No, I don't have a card.
I can back that up and get a better shot of it.
Sure. If you do want a tax letter, you could also donate to this one right here. Actually,
It's not on the screen.
yeah, it's not.
I'll take a picture of it
Yeah.
back here.
If you guys need a tax write-off. But I want to thank Ownbey Seventh-day Adventist Church for allowing me to share my testimony. Now I got to go to Floor Crest to share my testimony. So thank you.